a good place now. You are listening to Perspectives with Ashley Burgess.
Welcome back live to Live Your True Life Perspectives, and I'm your host, Ashley Burgess. On today's show, I'm asking the question, have you lost your identity? Honestly, think about it. Do you feel like you've lost your identity? Do you feel like you don't really know who you are anymore? I think that many of us find ourselves trapped in the situation where we seem to be living this life for everyone but ourselves. It seems as though we are living this life to make other people happy, to help other people, to help our kids, to help this, to help that, to make our parents proud. But we get to a point in our life where we begin to look around and we ask ourselves, what are we doing? What have we been doing with our life? Where are we? And what do we want to achieve? You know, later on in the hour, I'm going to offer some solutions to finding your identity. If you're lost, you can still be found. And you know the show is about solutions. But let's begin to talk about how we get trapped in a life where we feel as though we have actually lost our identity. And I think it begins when we're quite young. Well, I know it begins when we're quite young because we're looking for our identity and we have people around us who are shaping and creating and crafting and co-creating our identity. We're being told who we are and who we aren't, what we should value and what we shouldn't value, what we should love and what we shouldn't love, what we should do and what we shouldn't do, what's bad, what's good, and the list goes on. And it's interesting because I think for the most part when we're growing up, you know, our parents are so important. Our parents, whoever's like raising us, is so important. And we learn so much, good and bad, in the situation. And I think that most of our parents, the majority of our parents, want to do the best they can. You know, they're not trying to hurt us. They're doing the best they can. They're doing all they know based on how they were raised and the system that they went through. Some others had not the same chance. You know, raised with some family dynamics that was quite toxic, unhealthy, even abusive. But, you know, in the most part, and I understand folks that have gone through that as well. As a therapist, I work with clients almost on a daily basis dealing with that specific issue where they were raised by a parent who was either very narcissistic or maybe was dealing with other cluster B personality disorders that got in the way of them being a positive role model and a positive parent. The majority of us might have dealt with some toxicity, but for the most part, the parents tried as much as they could. But like we know it, things grow and they come in cycles. And until we deal with the issues of a cycle, the cycle is not broken. Until we understand that the cycle needs to be fixed, the cycle continues on in the ways that are not normally the best for everything that we need to be doing. You know, I find it very interesting, too, about how, you know, when we're going through our childhood, we're going through school, and we try to do things right. Many of us try to be an athlete, you know, because we knew that dad would really like the fact that we were an athlete. Or maybe, you know, mom wanted you to be a singer or a cheerleader. And, you know, you tried to jump into that and be that, you know, and be that person and be what mom or dad wanted you to be based on the fact that you wanted their attention. You wanted their acceptance. And I find that as we go through life looking for other people's acceptance, we end up losing our identity even more. Acceptance is the big thing. It's the big deal. It's the big kahuna. It's the big enchilada, right? And that enchilada called acceptance is something that we change our entire lives for to try to fit in. We groom ourselves in a way to look better. We dress a certain way. We act a certain way. We take certain classes. We do certain extracurricular activities. We hang with certain people to fit in, to get that acceptance. I find that many of us, unless we check ourselves, and I mean, I'm serious, I'm talking about a serious check. I find that many of us fall into that category, and the acceptance from our parents moves into the acceptance of our loved ones and the people that we're having a relationship with. And then that acceptance goes into our marriage and looking for acceptance from our spouse. And the acceptance moves on and on and on. And we never look for the acceptance within ourselves. And that's going to be a big thing because that plays the biggest part in our happiness or our unhappiness in our life. You know, I want to start talking about, you know how we go through elementary school, we go through middle school, we go through high school, we try to get good grades to impress our parents. Most of us really didn't care about the grades on our own. I mean, some of us did, but for the most part, it was to impress our parents or to make sure that our parents didn't get upset. You know, some of us were actually looking at colleges and that kind of sort of thing, and I get it. I kind of was like that, but I wasn't like that until my parents really imparted the fact that these grades were really important. And I remember, you know, going to college, and a lot of folks, it wasn't the same with me because my parents weren't really didn't really care about that. But I know some of my friends that their parents really cared about what college they went to, and they had to go to a certain college, and they had to get a certain degree, and they had to go to school for a certain degree. And their parents were like, you have to get a degree in business, or you have to get a degree in this, or you have to get a degree in that. Very interesting. And so instead of going to school for what you wanted to go to school for, you went to school for something that your parents wanted you to go to school for, or your grandmother, or your grandfather, or whoever raised you. You end up going to school to make them happy. And it doesn't stop there. You see what I'm saying? It doesn't stop there. It goes into the career. All of a sudden, you know, you've graduated with this, and now you go into a career to make your parents or your loved ones or your family happy, to be accepting of you. Even if you didn't want to become a lawyer, you become a lawyer. Even if you didn't want to become a school teacher, you become a school teacher. Whatever it is, you become because they want you to. Again, our identity is not our identity. Our identity is what's created from what other people want based on their acceptance of ourselves. And I find that it becomes this slippery slope effect because it doesn't stop there. It continues, and the caboose gets faster and faster. The railroad, the rail, the track, everything starts speeding up, and we begin to do this over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. Rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat with other things in our life. And, you know, we get out of school, and then you get that career, and the career is what they want, but you're unhappy. And so a lot of folks that I know, because of my profession, end up finding extracurricular activities to take their mind off the fact that they hate what they do every day. And that's always interesting, too, because it's like this it's like this two-sided. I can't remember the guy. It was on Batman where the guy had two faces, you know, like I guess he was called Two-Faced. I don't know. All right. That was pretty easy to figure out. But, you know, it's like you're wearing like two masks, and it's like half of your body is fighting the other half, right? Because we're really not being who we are. We're being what other people want us to be. We're trying to rebel, though, against that whole facet, against that whole, you know, kind of government situation that's co-created by whoever you're trying to get acceptance from. And so instead of really doing what you love and finding what you love, you're stuck in the entire equation of trying to make other people happy. Always an interesting dynamic, but usually ends up being a very frustrating dynamic because of the unhappiness that is relevant when we get into these types of situations. You know, the next step is we get that career, and then we begin to date, and then we fall into several different limitations and beliefs. We have a society belief in marriage. And it's been changing a little bit, but we have the society belief that you're supposed to get married. You're supposed to meet somebody, get married by a certain age. I mean, it's not the same as it was 10, 20 years ago, right? by a certain age because of the child thing. Well, if we're going to have a child, we got to get married by a certain age. It's a societal thing to do. It's the biological thing to do. And so when I return, I'll be talking more about that whole married quotient and what that does and how society pushes us in, and the help of society and the help of biology and the help of all of these things, as well as parents that want to see their kids happy by getting married. And also, we begin to move the acceptance that we should find for ourselves. We move that from ourselves because we didn't find it within ourselves yet into our soon-to-be spouse. Very interesting stuff. I'll be talking more about that when I return. Also, later on in the hour, some solutions to the situation. Also, don't miss Reggie Harvey later on in the hour discussing this subject matter and giving his perspective. Stay tuned. Live your true life perspectives with your host, me, Ashley Burgess, will be back in. I'll be back this time in 2 shakes.
I'm learning to fly. Turn it up and jump in the deep end on Perspectives. Now, here's Ashley.
Welcome back live to Live Your True Life Perspectives, and I'm your host, Ashley Burgess. On today's show, I'm asking the question, have you lost your personal identity? And I'm not talking about your credit report. I'm talking about you, your identity. Are you living the life that everybody wants you to live, or are you actually living the life that you want to live? Right before the break, I was talking about how, we go through the schooling, and many of us go to school where our parents wanted us to go to school, or maybe where our parents were alumni. And then we get a job with what our mom or dad wanted us to get a job in, or we followed mom's lineage, or we followed dad's lineage, or grandmother or grandfather's lineage. And then we get there, and then many of us, some of us might be happy, but many of us start to find fault in the system, and we begin to be unhappy, and we're not happy about the situation. And we're not happy about where we are, so we have this alter ego come out where we work the job that we hate and loathe all day, and then we go crazy doing other stuff. A lot of partying, drinking, alcohol, and the list goes on. And then we end up meeting, and we were dating people, and then you start dating someone for a longer period of time, and society begins to tell you from all the stuff around you that you should be married. What are you doing? You should be married by now. And by a certain age, if you're not married, your friends start going, why aren't you married? I mean, you got to hurry up. I mean, y'all been together for so long, you should get married. And then the biology, starts getting in there where the female's like, well, I got to do something if I'm going to have kids by a certain age, if I want to have healthy kids. That's changing a little bit, but, to a certain degree. And then you have the other person that wants to get married. I want to make this real. I want to formalize this relationship. So, in order to be accepted on that level, you jump into that relationship to get acceptance from your soon-to-be spouse. Okay. So now we've done what our parents want us to do. We've done what the folks wanted us to do about the career. We've done what the people around us think we should do to be successful. Now we've gotten married to do the societal thing, and now we're on that. We've done that thing to get the acceptance of our spouse that we love and we are committed to. And then we commit to the biological exchange because we look at the time frame and the children and the idea of having kids and what that means. And so we jump into that. And then And then now many of you have become the savior in the relationship or the victim or what have you. But in the savior complex, now you're providing for that other person. Now you are on the provider list, and it's your work to provide for that person. Provide. So now you're providing that person to help them because you want to give you want to help them out, but yet that's also the way that you're wired because you also want to get their acceptance and approval because you want to provide for them and therefore they'll love you. And so we go through that process. Okay. And now we got kids coming on the way because remember we had society saying you're supposed to have kids. It's the right thing to do. Then you have biology saying you got to do it fast because God knows what will happen if you wait. Even though they're making medical strides every day in this. And there's also kids that you can adopt too. And I know some people say, well, you got to be at a certain age there too. I get it. So then you jump into the kid deal. Okay. So now you're raising them. You're raising the kids. You're trying to be the good parents. Now, you were raised by parents. Most of you, the majority of you were raised by parents that, were not mean. They weren't trying to kill you. I mean, some of you were raised by some really horrible parents, and God bless them. I'm glad that you're here with us. But for the most part, most parents did what they knew best because, they were raised by their parents, right? And so now you've been raised, and you're teaching your kids the rights and wrongs, what to do, what not to do, what to believe, what not to believe in, right? What you want them to do, what's the right thing to do, what's the wrong thing to do. Okay, some of that stuff's good. It's good to know right from wrong, right? It's good to know what's legal and not legal, It's good to do things that are safe and not things that are going to kill you, but within reason. And then we have to really sit back, and a lot of folks say, well, I don't want to be anything like my mom. I don't want to be anything like my dad. Okay, and a lot of times in that situation, those folks become that parent. Because you're so worried about it, and you're telling yourself you don't want to be like them, but it's so funny, you become them. And it's funny because when you think about universal truths, the universe doesn't know the difference. And so that's something that I think is very interesting. I find it interesting because the universe doesn't hear the difference between I don't want and I want. It just hears that last part, be like my dad, be like my mom. Do you see what I'm saying? Critical information you probably could have used yesterday. Oh, that's a good one, right? I'm going to actually do a whole show and probably a book on that. Anyway, you heard it here on Live Your True Life Perspectives. So the thing is that we don't want to be like something, and so we work so hard not to that we become it. And as we're raising our kids, we begin to define and to define parameters on our child, limiting certain things, championing certain things, declaring other things as not being valuable, devaluing other things, valuing other things. And I think for the most part, the majority of folks out there are very positive parents trying to do the best they can. But you know what? Which also the limitations of the cycle that you were raised. And then you have your kids, and you're trying to do your best you can for your kids because you want your kids to love you. You want your kids to accept you. You want your kids to show love to you. I mean, everybody wants their kids to love them. I mean, that's why you had kids. You didn't have kids because you wanted your kids to hate you. And then you go through basically 18 years, and some of you have multiple kids. So it could be a combination of 25 years or 27 years or 20 years or whatever of raising these kids under your roof. Okay, raising the kids under your roof before they go to school, before they move out, before they get their first job, before they get married, before they go to the military, before. And as you're raising these kids, you're taking care of them, you're taking them to school, taking them to daycare, whatever. You're giving them little parties, you're cleaning up after you give them birthday parties, you're cleaning up after the mess when they're trying to eat when they're children, you're taking care of their toys, you're doing this, you're helping them with their homework, taking care of them when they're sick, the list goes on. And they become this fundamental part of your life. Because remember, your spouse was like, you had your parents, and then you had your friends, and then you have your spouse and your friends, and then your spouse becomes all that, and then you start having children, and then it's like that energy moves from the spouse to the children, and then the children, and then that's what you're focusing on then. And so you're focusing solely on the kids, so you're focusing on them, you're putting all your energy into those kids, and then you're defining yourself by how those kids feel and what they're doing and how great the kids are. And you got your kids, well, my kid's a straight A student, well, my kid's varsity football, well, my kid's actually on the golf team. Okay, great. And then you start defining yourself by your kids, what your kids are doing, what they're not doing. If they're really screwing up, you can be really mentally down in the dumps because we define ourselves by our kids and our family and who's doing what, and that defines our value. And so think about it. You've gone from defining yourself by what your parents told you were and what you're supposed to be to what your spouse said, what your spouse says. Then you got your kids. So now it's like your spouse and your kids, and you're kind of in the back burner because you still really haven't defined who you are. Because in order to define who we truly are, we have to know who we truly aren't. Okay? I mean, you have to really know what the heck you do not want to be like to understand what you do. But when we're so busy raising all these kids and taking care of the spouse and doing what so-and-so said and what mom and dad wants us to do and all this, we have all this going on. We have all that going on at one time. We lose ourselves because we never really had a firm identity. And I'm not trying to scare you on this show. I'm just trying to explain the fact that because we didn't have that solid identity, we begin to feel as though we're losing ourselves. And then the next thing happens. And many people feel like this is a horrible situation. Some people are overwhelmed by it. Some people have an emotional breakdown when the kids move out of the house. When the last kid moves out of the house, it's almost like a fallout. Okay? All of a sudden, you and your spouse become empty nesters. And at first, it sounds real fun, like y'all are going to go hang out and party, and some of you do. You have a great time, but many of you get really sad, depressed, lonely, worried about what's going to happen next. And when I return, I'll be talking more about that. Also, Reggie Harvey is joining me live in studio to discuss his perspective on this exact topic and put in his thoughts because he's got a really amazing unique perspective. If you haven't already, check out my YouTube channel. Go to YouTube, Google YouTube, YOUTUBE, put in Ashley Burgess, Ashley, BERGES. Every week on my channel, you'll find new video content discussing everything from marriage to winning an argument with a narcissist to dealing with toxic relationships to understanding personal identity, and the list goes on. Stay tuned. When we return, we'll be talking more about identity and later on solution on how to find yourself and how to find out who you truly are beginning right now. Stay tuned because Live Your True Life Perspectives with your host, me, Ashley Burgess, will be back in. I'll be back this time in 2 shakes.
This is Jake Busey, and you're listening to Perspectives with Ashley Burgess.
Welcome back live to Live Your True Life Perspectives, and I'm your host, Ashley Burgess. On today's show, I'm asking the question, have you lost your identity? Are you living the life that you want to live, or are you living the life for everybody else? I think this is a good time to hear what Reggie Harvey has to say. Reggie is the survivor of a near-fatal illness, the author of the recent book Anatomy of a Patient, and he's also a great friend. Reggie, so good to have you in the studio tonight.
Hey, Ashley. Thanks for having me back.
You know, tonight I've been talking about the concept of feeling trapped, losing one's identity in this lifetime that we've created, where it's almost like we're following like this cookie-cutter way of life. We're doing what we've been told we should do, and then kind of one day we kind of wake up and wonder, what happened?
Well, you know, I told you before that I've been a workaholic all my life, and I loved work. I loved the idea of learning things and teaching myself things, but I had set a very rigid schedule from 6 a.m. in the morning till 6 p.m. in the evening, and it was just manic. But when I was diagnosed with renal failure, and they told me that you could have died in your sleep and not awakened, that stuck with me. And suddenly my whole life plan was derailed. It didn't help that it was Christmas Eve when I found this out. But in that state of shock, I went through all the phases of grief in one afternoon. And the most important thing that I discovered is that I never really thought about my mortality. I was busy doing my plan. I had it all worked out. And in one statement, completely obliterated everything that I thought was important. And I really dealt with this idea that, well, if I died that day, would I be clawing at the sheets trying to cling to life? And suddenly it dawned on me that, no, I really had a pretty good life. I had access to things that most people didn't. I've been able to see the world. I've been able to pretty much make my own choices. I didn't have any real regrets, and that was what I figured out. Although I wasn't ready to leave this plane, I was okay if this was it. But the funny thing about that is it made me start to value time. I never thought about the fact that I would run out of time. And now I was faced with this. What I mean by that, valuing time, I learned in that revelation that everything was important. The little things were just as important as the big things. And that you can make time to see those little things, to experience those things. In other words, if this is going to be my last day, rather than bemoan the fact, I'm going to enjoy the hell out of it. Every second, it's going to be the best day possible. So if that's all I've got, I didn't waste it. I didn't waste time with the people that I'm with. If I'm with them, I'm really with them. I want to know how they're feeling. I want to get under their skin. I want to be a part. I don't want to fake anything anymore. So that was one key to unlock the mystery.
That's powerful, because I find that a lot of us are walking through the motions of life. You know, I've done previous shows, as you know, Reggie, on feeling trapped in one's life, and I think we kind of go through this pattern, or, you know, this normalcy, and it's not until we finally, like, slow down. You know, like the analogy that I was talking about earlier, you know, about, you know, going to an event and everything is just speeded up. And all of a sudden when it's over, you sit there and you say, this is it. You know, this was it. Why didn't I try to slow it down? And I think, you know, part of doing the show is to get people to realize where they are. How, in this situation, with the situation you were in, how did you begin to slow the mind down and start really realizing you can do whatever you want?
Well, I think the second key to the lock, to unlock this mystery, was understanding that it wasn't about trying to please people or trying to keep people happy or make people happy. It's impossible to do that anyway, but you still feel obligated to fit in, find your tribe, and get your identity through your tribe rather than what you truly value. And so now that I've given up the idea that I'm not going to be clinging irrationally to life, but I'm not willing to surrender either. That was the first key. So the second key, I'm not trying to make anybody happy, and I'm not trying to do any harm to anyone. So when you let that burden go, that takes up so much energy. I had no idea how much energy that consumed until I let it go. And in letting that go, there was time. I reclaimed time in order to enjoy to the fullest my activities with people, to go and experience a museum or watch a movie again and really pay attention and not have several other things going on in my mind, reading a book and really getting absorbed in it. I had forgotten how to do that. So whatever it was or whatever I was participating in, I was fully 110% there. I didn't rush through anything.
So basically you're talking about mindfulness. So how did you get your mindset into that, to let go of that thinking mind and to really focus and get into that mindful mind where it's not about thought, it's about doing?
Well, it was the key for me was having been told, like I said, that you could have died in your sleep and not awakened. That had never occurred to me in the 60 years of my life at that point. Sure, I had seen people die and lost friends and stuff, but, you know, it's like, well, that's other people. That's not going to happen to me. And then suddenly they're telling me I'm already there. I could have died last week, any day. And with that, once that reality was set, everything else that I had thought was important became irrelevant. My prioritizations changed. It was all about being present, as you say, being mindful, even starting to be mindful of my own body. How did I deal with this concept that I was sick for 20 years and didn't know, and the doctors didn't know? Nobody knew. I thought I knew what normal was. And then I'm told, not only do you not know what normal is, you were so far on the edge, you could have stopped being here. So that just shifted everything, and immediately you let go. And when you can finally let go and you make time to think about things deeply and revisit things you thought you had figured out, and you find out you didn't figure it out for you. You figured it out so you fit into the tribe, so that you were not rocking the boat, that you were accepted, that you had validation from these people that really didn't have your best interest at heart. And not that everybody was in that category, but you realize that, gosh, I exposed myself to this. I suppressed the things I really wanted and did things that I didn't want to do because I didn't want to hurt somebody's feelings. I didn't show respect for myself. Therefore, they didn't show respect for me. All of that just got wound up in this idea of, well, I was close to death, but I hadn't died. Now, I can't stay here and worry every second of every day of whether or not I'm going to die. So it's like, get over it and get on with it. So that was that thing about enjoying every day. If it's going to be the last day, then it's going to be great. And everybody around me is going to have a great day.
Well, that's how we should all be living, but sometimes we think about gratitude and sometimes it comes and goes.
So the new program was really living to the fullest to please myself. And not be so concerned about how other people were going to react, not necessarily buy into approved behavior. If I wanted to visit someone, I'll call them up and see if they've got time to see me. And if they do, then we're going to have a great day. Or if I need to take a trip, well, I'm going to take a trip. Yeah, I'm sick, but if I need a wheelchair, I'll ask for one. It'll be okay. I'm not going to be embarrassed, because how I feel about it is going to affect how the people around me feel about it. So I'm in control of that.
That's said wisely, and I agree with you, Reggie. Where can our listeners find you?
I have a new website called reggieharvey.net. That's ReggieHarvey.net. And on there, there's information about me, information about the book, Anatomy of a Patient. There's links to Amazon so that you can get a hold of the book. And there's a blog section that we're going to be opening up.
I love your perspective, Reggie, and I look forward to seeing you next week in studio.
Ashley, it's always a joy to be with you.
I love Reggie's take on this concept because it's a big deal. Many of us are in this place right now. We feel lost, and we feel as though we've been living a life for somebody else. When I return, I'll be talking more about being the empty nester and feeling that way and feeling lonely and wondering what happened with our life. And then I'm going to go right into solutions, the things that we can do right now to make those changes, the things that we can implement today to feel better and to find our true identity and to begin to live our true life. Stay tuned, because Live Your True Life Perspectives with your host, me, Ashley Burgess, will be back in. I'll be back this time in 2 shakes.
You could be my luck.
Get in here. You're listening to Perspectives with Ashley Burgess.
Welcome back live to Live Your True Life Perspectives, and I'm your host, Ashley Burgess. On today's show, I've been asking the question, have you lost your personal identity? Many of us feel trapped and lost because we've been living a life for everybody else this entire time, and we really haven't been living the life that we want to live. It was a great conversation with Reggie. I loved his perspective. And I began to talk about the empty nester and what happens when we get married and we go through that process and we fall in love and we want their acceptance, and then we take care of the kids and we get their acceptance and we're doing everything for them, that when we become the empty nester, that's where you normally have issues in a marriage. And I work with clients with this exact issue too, because that's when you start saying, what the heck am I doing? Was I ever in love? Did I really ever love this person? Am I really that happy? I mean, you start questioning a lot of things. And in that situation, you start questioning it because you've been living this life for so long that you haven't really taken time to figure out who you are. And I'm not talking about just driving to work in the morning, listening to your sports show, or listening to hopefully Live Your True Life Perspectives, but you got to take some time to figure out who you are, and it's never too late to begin. There is never an age that's too late. You want to do it now when you have a chance, because you don't want to have regret later on. But if you do it now, you're going to feel very good. You're going to feel great. You're going to feel responsible for the fact that you actually care enough about your life to find who you truly are. I've realized, too, that when we're looking for ourselves, when we finally come to that point, the crossroads, we begin to realize that we've been doing a lot of things for a lot of people, and we haven't really been doing things for ourselves. We might have thought we were, but we weren't. Or we might have been doing things that we thought we wanted because of society, but it wasn't really what we wanted. Maybe we even bought things for ourselves that we thought we wanted, but we really didn't want that either. It was just what society said that we should have bought for us. You know, it's like falling into the gimmicks of we're supposed to have this watch and we're supposed to wear this outfit, and the list goes on. Always very interesting stuff. And I think that when we start pulling apart these pieces and these different layers and taking off these different masks of acceptance, we begin to realize that we want to get to know ourselves, hopefully, but how do we begin? And it begins by realizing that we have to accept ourselves. And we have to realize what we stand for. I like to walk through an exercise with my clients, and it's a lot more in depth than I can go into on this show because I do need a couple hours. And if I had a couple hours, I could definitely do this. But in order to understand ourselves, we have to understand what we stand for, our values, our intentions, what we believe in. And once we understand that, we can begin to really understand a lot of things because we understand why we do what we do. We can understand, are we living the life that we should live? We can ask ourselves those questions. Are we living the life based on our values and beliefs? Are we living properly by that? Are we doing ourselves justice? Are we doing what's right? You know, and as we write down those values and those beliefs and looking at ourselves, am I living true to this? Am I doing what I want to do? Another thing is to write down the things that you want to do in your life, the things that you've always wanted to do, the things that you've always had an attachment to, you've always had a passion for, but you've kind of swept under the rug to do what is wanted by society, that's wanted by your family, that's wanted to pay the bills, things that you had to do. So writing out a list of the things that you want to do. What do you want to accomplish? What do you love doing? And thinking about that. A lot of times if you go back to your childhood, you can really think very clearly on this subject matter. Before it was told that you couldn't do it or it wasn't the right thing to do or people made fun of you, you're able to actually focus on that. And then the next thing that we walk through is really getting to know yourself by understanding what you love about yourself and what you don't, because that's really, really important. Because the one thing that we've been looking for our whole life is acceptance, but we've been looking in the wrong place. We've been looking in the wrong place for acceptance this whole time. And what I mean by that is we've been looking for acceptance outside of ourselves this whole time, whether it's with our wife or our husband, our spouse, our mother, our father, our sister, our brother, our kids. We've been looking for acceptance outside of ourselves this whole time, and we've never given ourselves a chance to accept ourselves. And it really begins with focusing on those things that I just talked about. But one of the biggest things to do is also to understand that negative self-talk within ourselves. And I really work with my clients to understand where that is and what that does to our life, where we go with our life, how that helps us, how that intimidates us, how it hurts us, how it holds us back, how it defines us, how it keeps us in the same place over and over again because we feel like we have to be there. And once we're able to really see who we truly are based on these things that we rarely look at, we begin to have intention. We begin to find true purpose. And yes, raising a family and having that is part of a purpose, but also every individual has a purpose outside of that, a purpose that is for them to achieve. And when we're able to realize that, when we let go of that negative self-talk, and I have a proven way of doing that, and we get into self-acceptance, which is so powerful because it happens. I've watched it happen thousands of times with thousands of clients, and I'm very proud of that. And I'm really proud of it because it works. But what happens is that then you have this self-acceptance. And when you get that self-acceptance, you begin to figure out what I call the unconditional love quotient. And when you get the unconditional love quotient, then everything works out. Because all of a sudden we realize who we are. We realize why we're here. And we might not have all the answers, but we're allowing ourselves to come up with those answers. We're allowing ourselves to think about those answers. We're allowing ourselves to have time to incubate those answers and not to question the answers, not to stifle the answers, but to accept those gut answers, the answers that come from our gut, the answers that reside within us. And that is what we begin to realize. And so if you felt lost, if you felt like your identity was never really yours, if you felt as if you were lost in your own life, well, now it's time to claim you. And when we claim ourselves, we do ourselves such amazing justice because we finally begin to see who we are through the appropriate lens to understand our value, to understand real, true acceptance, and to be able to walk the path and the journey of our true life. Please share this show with friends and family, and I'd love to hear your input as well. If you'd like to contact me to talk about the show, or you'd like to contact me to begin working with me, to hire me as your therapist or life coach, go to ashleyburgess.com. ashleyburgess.com. Click on that contact page, send me an email, and I will respond ASAP, and I look forward to working with you. Stay tuned, because Live Your True Life Perspectives with your host, me, Ashley Burgess, will be back in. I'll be back this time in 3 shakes.